When you start a story, typically you can see a physical change in how people in the room are seated and, how they're looking at you changes. And I always explain that as when you start telling a story, people are preconditioned and hardwired to listen and they drop their critical thinking barriers.
This is the Storytelling for Sales podcast, a show about leveraging the power of storytelling to ignite your sales performance and grow your business.
Hello, this is Ed Bilat, and today we have a deep and introspective show for you with a great sales leader and my distinguished guest, Gregg Jorritsma, Senior Director of Sales and Marketing at OnRamp Solutions, is joining us from Toronto, Canada. Gregg Jorritsma, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation to be part of this. It's a great opportunity. I'm happy to take part.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited that you could join us today and would love to jump right to the interview. But before we do this, I will ask you our traditional question. What business success story inspires you and why?
That's a great place to start, actually, because I think a lot of this is about identifying someone and really seeing something in somebody that you want to emulate and make part of your life. I've always been of a mind that there are no Roy Hobbs out there. There are no natural salespeople. None that I've ever met anyway. I think everyone that is achieving success in sales at some point in their career, hopefully early in their careers, had somebody see something in them and really take the effort to sort of mentor them and coach them. I have had the great benefit of having some wonderful people coach me and mentor me over the years. And there are a couple that really stand out above more so than some of the others. And a couple I would refer to are both William Tatham or Bill Tatham from Janna Systems and now NexJ Health, but also Jim Estill. Jim Estill founded EMJ Distribution in Guelph when he was just out of university. He started the business by selling printer supplies out of the trunk of his car.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, built that business up to, probably just shy of $1 billion before one of the big boys, Citrix, acquired the company.
Okay, that's not a bad acquisition.
Yeah, that's not a bad start, right? But I think what really resonates with me about Jim Estill is he's always had this sort of philosophy of being more than just a business guy, but being involved in his community and really giving back. A few years ago, I think it was 2015, he actually reached into his own pocket. Now, it's reported he spent about $1.5 million and brought 50 Syrian refugee families to Canada and set them up in Guelph.
Oh, this is very recent, huh? Okay.
Yeah. And when I first read about that, it didn't surprise me at all. He was always that type of person that really was not interested in doing well at business, but also, setting an example. And when he did this, it was just amazing to read about. And recently, he's been inducted as an officer of the Order of Canada. And he's just such a humble man. And, I've known him for about 20 years. First, obviously, as a customer selling product to EMJ. And then later, he has become a friend and a mentor and a real business hero for me. In my mind, I think he is the type of person that you look at and go, geez, I hope my kids grow up to be like him. Right?
Oh, wow. Well, I know you have two boys, so that's a really good example.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things that really says it all about Jim is after Citrix and Syrian thing, he recently became the owner of Danby Appliances in Guelph. And one of the first things he did was change the company motto to do the right thing. And I think that just exemplifies Jim in every way that is possible. He is the type of person that always does the right thing, I think, in my opinion. And he said, in conversations with him, he's told me, yeah, it's caused me to make some mistakes that have cost me money, but overall, it has served me well. And it makes, sleeping at night and doing the right thing just makes sense for him. So I've always admired that and kind of look for him for inspiration and guidance from time to time.
That's a wonderful story and wonderful source of inspiration for you and for the kids. So what you're saying, that you can be successful, right? And then you can do the right thing at the same time.
Yeah, I think, especially in today's environment, I think there is so much emphasis on profit, 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 stock market reports, stock tickers, and everything else that it's easy to get distracted from, doing what's right. And so I really admire him for that. The other business hero that really comes to mind is a gentleman I worked for a couple times in the late 90s, was Bill Tatham. He founded Janna Systems, which was a CRM company, and he believed in it and was passionate about it to the point where, he confided in me one time that, the sheriffs were at the door to take the house at one point, but he believed in what he was doing and was going to make it right. He did. He turned it around and grew that company substantially in the late 90s when companies like Siebel and Clarify and Vantiv were the dominant players. This little company out of Toronto came out and grew its business by focusing exclusively on the vertical segment of financial services. A lot of our strategy was focused on the teachings within the book Crossing the Chasm. So we focus exclusively on financial services. And despite the fact we were, a fraction of the revenue play that companies like Siebel and stuff were, we were winning on Wall Street with Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo and Allstate. And eventually, the big stock players, Siebel and stuff, came knocking and had to buy the company because they needed the roster. They needed the customer roster. And I think it's still $1.4 billion. I think it's still one of the top 5 or 6 acquisitions of a Canadian company to date. So what I learned from him more than anything and working in that environment is if you're committed to something and passionate about it and have the discipline more than anything to stick with it. In those early days, as we were chasing around trying to find revenue and customers, it would have been easy to, avert our focus away from financial services and just take some opportunistic account. But his vision was to focus on financial services. So there were opportunities that we bypassed that we probably could have won. But it was really important that we dominated in financial services. And as it turned out, that was absolutely the right move to make. So that, more than anything is if you believe in it and you're willing to be disciplined about it, you can achieve something, is what I really learned from that.
Oh, I really love it. These are great 2 stories you mentioned.
Thank you.
So let's turn the spotlight back at you. So
Okay.
obviously you've been in sales roles for many years. I mean, Bell, Siebel, Citrix, Route 1, Soti, BlackBerry, and now OnRamp Solutions. How did you even get into the sales?
Actually, completely by accident.
Really? So what happened?
So in in about 1988, I had finished college and I had a summer job the previous couple summers on an order desk for a chemical supply company. I didn't even consider it a sales role, really. I was just answering the phone and taking orders for various electroplating chemicals, most of which I had no idea what they were or what they would be used for.
So that's not even a farmer in the sales world. No, so it's definitely not a hunter, but not a farmer either, right?
No, not at all. So once the summer ended, I had recently become engaged to my now wife of 29 years.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
we were young and stupid, and we decided to quit our jobs and just move out of Toronto to Waterloo. No jobs, no prospect, nothing.
Why would you do that?
Well, it was the start of what was going to be our marriage and our life together. And we just figured, let's just looking back, there's a saying that goes, it's not youth that is wasted on the young, it's fearlessness. Right?
Oh, that's interesting. I can resonate with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I remember being so fearless back then, right? We had no responsibilities, we had no kids, we had no bills, we had no mortgage or anything, right? So it wasn't an easy decision to make, but it was one that, you don't have all the baggage that you do later on in life to make, right?
Sure.
So we moved, and of course, back then there was no internet or anything, right? A few days later, I read an ad in a local paper about a new company in town called Vestronics and saw that they were hiring inside sales reps. And I thought, well, that was my title at the chemical company. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I applied, and I was called in for an interview a few days later. It was 1989, so there was no internet research or anything I could do about the company before I went to the interview. I just sort of put on my best face and best clothes and went for the interview.
And just show up.
Yeah. So I met initially with the director of inside sales, and we talked for about 5 or 10 minutes. And to this day, I still don't know what it was that I did or said, but she immediately told me, well, you're way too qualified for this role. Would you be interested in talking to the director of channel sales about a role? So At this point in my life, I didn't even know what channel sales was. I didn't know what the company did, but I said, sure, I'm keen. Why not?
Okay.
So I met with the director of channel sales, and about 30 minutes later, I was offered a job on the channel sales team.
Right on the spot.
Yeah, I was thrilled and terrified all at the same time. I showed up on the Monday, and I remember sitting in the lobby waiting for them to come and get me. And I remember looking at the poster of the product and thinking, oh, what is that? And what does this company do?
Yeah, what do they do? What do they actually do? Yeah.
Absolutely no idea it was even a software company on my first day. I was in that role for about 3 years with the company until Pro-C got into some different financial issues and ended up selling the company. But I learned how they were selling a C source code application generator, a very technical product for programming, and was successful and really got my introduction into software and sales as a whole. And immediately, just loved it.
So would you say it was like a natural fit for your abilities?
As I said, I don't think there's a natural sales rep. I think there's always more that you can learn. And certainly nobody comes in with, the answer to every sales problem, right? Thinking back to that time, I think it was something that I was excited about on a daily basis. And I felt, I had some success with early on and in the role. So, and so many times with salespeople, it's really about confidence. Do you
Hmm.
have confidence in what you're selling? Do you know it can make a difference? And if you have that confidence, there's a lot of intellectual curiosity goes with that confidence that drives you to learn more and become more capable. And I've always found, the ability to just ask questions to potential customers and listen to what they're saying can really fuel your imagination as to what kind of solution and what kind of place you can play in that role.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So I've read somewhere actually today, they say, don't outsell your competition. You should out-question them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And that has to do with your success. So obviously, in your role, like, do you have any particular failures, like early sales failures? What's your favorite sales failure?
Well, of course, every sale I've ever been involved with, I closed.
Yeah, I'm sure. From the day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never lost a deal. Of course, there are always different things that come up and things you could have done right or wrong. But I think one of the most significant sales disappointments I've ever had really led to a real epiphany moment with a great manager I had at the time. This was early 90s, and it was the last day of a quarter. And we were driving, we had hit the number, but we were driving for overachievement, right? And I had a deal working and it was going to be there, it was going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I was on the phone to the prospect right up to the deadline, right up to the end of the day, only to have the customer in the end take a last minute bid from one of the companies that I thought had already been eliminated from the process.
Oh, what a surprise, huh?
Yes, apparently they came in with some last minute cheap lowball offer and won, right? And I remember sitting at my desk and it was maybe about 5:30 by now, and I was really upset. I was really disappointed. My sales manager happened to walk by and said, asked me, he could see I was visibly upset.
Of course. You could feel this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had promised I was going to get it, right? So, and he sort of came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, hey, it happens. Did you do everything you could do? And I said, yeah. And it didn't go your way? No. He told me, you can't beat yourself up about it. This is what has always stuck with me. He said, we are selling software here. We're not curing cancer.
Mm.
Nobody dies because you didn't close the sale. Now put your head up, go home, be with your family. Your family is more important than any sale would ever be. And another little tidbit he offered a few days later, in the months that always stuck with me too, is you're no good to me here as a salesperson if you don't have a life outside of the office.
Hmm.
Right. That sort of always stuck with me. So over the years in conversations with many reps that I've worked with and had on my team and stuff, I've always emphasized, take the work seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. And remember, we're selling software. We're not doing brain surgery. We're not, curing cancer. Nobody dies if it doesn't work out. Right.
Ah,
And, for me, it has always been a way of keeping in perspective winning and losing in the marketplace, right? When we win, we don't cure cancer either, right? We're
mhm.
selling software and we want them to choose ours, but nobody dies if they don't.
That's right, right. And that gives you an altitude and perspective, right? So just when you're looking at this is not the end of the world. It eliminates the stress. So your team is more excited, more motivated, right? And they don't feel punished if they've done everything they could and, the sale just didn't go your way. So what? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it happens to everybody, right? I mean, one of the things that, I've learned over the years, and when I talk about there's no, Roy Hobbs or natural salesperson out there,
Mm-hmm.
it's an unnatural act. Sales is an unnatural act. You're asking for rejection, right? And you make your living day after day being rejected. And so you have to have a perspective and a more holistic view to what's going on in the world, I think, to really make value in the conversations you have with your prospective clients and coworkers.
That's right. Absolutely. So speaking of your team and the leadership positions, and you've done everything, right?
Hmm.
From a market manager to channel sales manager, director, VP, like all these years. How do you think storytelling could be used to motivate your sales team and drive the success in terms of reaching or even surpassing quotas and objectives?
I think there's so many different things that storytelling really allows you to do. I find it's often the best place to start a conversation and build a connection to a person you're engaging with. I've obviously met people that I've tried to convey this to, and sometimes the pushback is, well, I don't feel comfortable, or I'm not sure I can actually tell a story and everything. And when that comes up, I often talk about, okay, so have you ever been to a social event or a cocktail party or anything like that? Well, of course they have, right?
Yeah.
So when you met someone new there, what did you talk about? Well, we had a couple of small, and then I talk about work or my family or whatever. Right. You told a story, right? Right. And, oh, yeah, I guess so. And a sales rep comes to me and says, I don't really know how to build a story, or, how do I, craft a story, or, structure it. And, I'll talk to them about their last sale, right? Who's the company? They'll tell me. What did
Mm-hmm.
they do? What problem were they struggling with? How did our solution solve their problem? What kind of results are they having today? And quickly yeah, I guess that's not hard at all. Yeah, okay. So I think if you're not really coached or told about or understand the value of storytelling to a prospect, there's an intimidation, I think, to it, that you won't be believed, or they'll dismiss your story as out of hand, or, it's just a fabrication, right? And so I think just getting people to the point where you tell stories every day, all the time, to everybody. Now, put yourself in the prospect's shoes and think about, what story would they like to hear? Most often, it's a story about a similar company, a similar type of business that was, wrestling with a problem, because they probably have a similar problem.
Mm-hmm.
How they chose your product, how you built it up, how you deployed it, and what kind of results they're getting. The inherent thing in storytelling is that we're hardwired to both tell and listen to a story. Right from childhood, as a parent, you read stories to your kids, and, early on they start with once upon a time, and they typically end with happily ever after.
That's right.
That's what a customer wants to hear. And I think, when you start a story, typically you can see a physical change in how people in the room are seated, and, how they're looking at you changes. And I always explain that as, when you start telling a story, people are preconditioned and hardwired to listen, and they drop their critical thinking barriers. If you think about when you go to a movie today, a ridiculous movie, a sci-fi movie, and you suspend your critical thinking to enjoy the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly the power and transformative engagement that can happen when you start telling a story in a business meeting. And it's been hugely valuable throughout my career. And I was lucky enough, as I said early on, to have some mentors that really taught me the value of being able to tell a story.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your response because you're hitting two very important points. One is the actual story, and there is a formula behind it, right? And the second one is the way how you can use storytelling to overcome objections, right? So
Yes.
instead of saying, like, what do you mean you don't have a budget? What do you mean you're not a decision maker? Right? So, like, all you do, you acknowledge an objection. And by the way, objection and any objection is a good thing,
Absolutely.
and it's an indication that they want to have a conversation with you, because otherwise they would just go away, right? And there will be no further talk. So if a person objects to you, that means there is an interest, right? And
Hmm.
then how do you work with that objection? So I think you hit on some very important points. right? So instead of telling them, we are the best in the world, we're going to take care of you, we've done it, millions of times, and we're going to do a good job. You tell them, listen, I appreciate what you're saying. 2 months ago, we've been working with the company XYZ, and they essentially told us exactly the same thing. There is no budget for that type of project. And
Mhm.
then you tell the story, and then you demonstrate the end results. So, and this is the way the customer will see that, hey, if that worked for somebody else, maybe that could work for myself, right?
Sure.
That's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah. As you speak about budget and things like that, one of the stories from a Siebel day actually was the success we had with one of the biggest auto manufacturers in the world. We had won the deal, and it was some months later, and we were having lunch with the decision maker. And I was with the CEO and Bill Tatham, and he asked them, so why did we win the deal? And I thought the answer was not only fascinating, but it has been a real source of inspiration over the years.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
The guy told me that of all the vendors, we brought in 7 vendors, and of all the vendors, you guys were the only one that didn't ask what the budget was.
Okay.
And the answer was, or the response from Mr. Tatham was that, the reason we didn't ask about budget was because our only concern was finding a solution that worked for you. Our thinking is always that if we provide the right solution, if the budget doesn't fit, you'll either find the money or you'll decide that you don't need that much solution.
So it doesn't matter what budget is, right?
Yeah. So over the years, what that has evolved to is, when I have those type of budget discussions is, are you looking for exactly this? Or are you willing to compromise and do without something just so it fits a budget? Is your goal to solve the business problem completely? Or is it to hit the budget number?
Mm-hmm.
When you put that to them, that creates a whole different set of parameters for them. Even if they're not the decision maker, in most cases, they're probably not. You're probably talking to the project manager or someone who is in a technical role or whatever. And they're obviously very concerned about budget and price because their boss has told them, okay, you've got this much money, go fix the solution, go find the solution, right?
Sure, do it.
And again, getting back into what does that person want to be able to tell? What story does that person want to tell to his boss, right? And in that circumstance, it was, we're going to give you the story that says, we can solve all your business problems and this, and this. But yeah, it's going to cost you an extra percentage. So you can decide if you want to spend the extra money to get everything resolved or settle for something that isn't quite spend that amount of money and still not have exactly what you want.
Yeah, I love how you position this, and it does make sense. So in this case, the budget is irrelevant, right? So like this is what we're trying to achieve. This is the task at hand, and
Yes.
we're going to help you just with that. I think that's an excellent story. So thank you so much for sharing this. So obviously, you've been in many sales situations through the years. You've seen a lot of great leaders. Like, what challenges do you see facing many of today's sales leaders? What's happening today?
Well, I think certainly the world has changed since I started. I mean, as, for the third or fourth time, I'll mention the internet didn't exist when I started. So doing research on a customer and really preparing yourself for a meeting was a lot more difficult when I started. So I think there's 2 problems that are really relevant today. The first one is technology and mobility. I think it has created a real challenge for sales leaders because you're going to have sales reps, working from home offices, working in remote locations, or they're on the road and they have access to all the tools and communication and everything else. But I think quite often because of that convenience of technology, sales managers miss out on a couple things. And one is I think it's absolutely imperative, and what I do all the time is make sure that I'm bringing the group together, let's say quarterly sales meetings, so that they have the opportunity to meet with the other sales reps on their team and have social interaction.
See them face to face, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It creates real trust relationships. And the other thing is, when I reflect back on some of the great learning that I've been exposed to over the years, most often it's been completely informal. A talk with one of the senior sales guys while we're getting coffee in the kitchen, or were downstairs having a smoke years ago. Downstairs having a smoke
Okay.
years
Okay.
ago, just talking about a sales opportunity or whatever,
Got you.
right?
Okay.
But I think what often goes missing in today's day and age is the sense that it's really important to bring together the group collectively on a regular basis. And then the second thing around that is I think it's really important that sales managers also go out to those regions and work one-on-one with them, go on a few sales calls every quarter or whatever. Just have that, one-to-one sort of interaction with their team. It offers so much exposure to their lives and who they are as people that it really gives you great insights into how to build and how to, support that person. A favorite line of mine is fair and same are not the same terms, are not synonymous, right? The idea that what works for one person, if I give this other person the same thing, they should be successful, isn't the way the world works anymore. People learn differently, people have different behavior practices and different requirements. You need to be flexible and understand that your objective as a sales leader is to give each individual on your team what they need to have an equal opportunity at success. Now, for some, that might be almost a completely hands-off relationship with the person that, they know what they're doing, they just go and they do it.
That's right.
Another person might require, to talk to you periodically and get some coaching. Another, it's all over the board. But if you're not receptive to the idea that you need to support different people on the team in different ways, and you're not willing to go out and actually spend that time with them one-on-one, I think that becomes a real issue in today's world. The other one that, I think is an age-old problem is the use of a CRM. In my experience over the years, too many CRMs lean way too heavily on what management wants from data, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to building something that is supportive and it guides the sales rep through the sales process. The best deployments are ones where the sales rep actually loves using the CRM and doesn't see it as a burden and a chore to do.
Right. Like as a punishment or like a big brother watch, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if they feel that way about the CRM, what happens is the data you're getting in is minimal, it's incomplete, it's not what you ultimately set out to get. I always tell people that a sales CRM should drive the sales rep through each stage of the sales cycle and give them specific tasks and chores that need to be accomplished in each stage before you can check off and move it to the
Yeah,
next
that's
level.
right. So it's a tool. It's a useful tool, which is
Absolutely.
supposed to help the sale, right?
It's a roadmap.
Versus just like this is something I fill out on Friday afternoon, so management is not going to punish me on Monday morning.
Exactly. And when you get to that level, the sales reps want to use it and want to be involved in it. When a sales rep starts to struggle, as everyone does periodically, it gives them a basis to go back and say, okay, I got to get back to doing that and I got to do this. And then from a new hire perspective, it gives them a roadmap as to what others have done here and how they were successful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, there's a real balance between building the CRM so that you get the data out of you want as a management group, but also making it a supportive and consultative tool for the sales reps that are working day to day.
That's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful suggestion. So
Yeah.
like both of them, I really like them. So for any of our podcast listeners, sales leaders, please listen up to these two. We'll make sure to summarize them. So we're getting toward the end of our podcast. So it's been wonderful, wonderful combination of wisdom and practical experience, Greg. So before we disconnect, what's the best way to connect with you for our listeners?
Sure. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I've got all my contact information. Unlike almost everybody else, I have an email address and a phone number on my LinkedIn profile.
Oh, wow, you're very brave.
Well, I'm always willing to talk to people, right? I mean, the other thing, one of the other pieces of advice I received early on, and I've always kept to, and I always share with people is when someone wants to talk to you, you learn nothing by saying no. Whether it's somebody calling for a job, would you be interested in a job about this? Well, if I say no, even if I'm not particularly looking or interested, if I say no, I'll never know anything about it. So always say yes, always be willing to have a discussion and listen and learn.
That's right. And you will know, or you'll never know where that door could take you, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So wonderful. So thank you so much, Greg. I really, really appreciate it. So we'll make sure to include your contact information. It's been wonderful to have you on that show today.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
That does it for this episode of Storytelling for Sales. You'll find show notes and links on our webpage, StorytellingSales.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.